In this video, we're going to be discussing the concept of the shadow, how to perform shadow work, some practical methods, and how you can integrate this into your lifestyle to develop a more holistic and integral personality to become a full human per se, right? So let's first start off with just a story of a practical example how I have experienced some shadow work, how I've noticed it. So there was a point in time where I was stingy, right? I was basically just hoarding all the money I was earning. I wasn't really doing anything, and it was bothering me, right? And I didn't realize it until I started seeing other people mention this to me. They were just basically saying like you aren't really contributing to the family, you aren't really doing giving, I should say, as much as everyone else is. So I noticed that there's this personal flaw within myself that I had to fix somehow. And it took a while to eventually realize that it was stinginess, which is like this unconscious part of myself that was in a way degrading and deteriorating my relationships with some really close loved ones. So the solution to that was basically just become more giving, become more contributive to the environment I'm in with these loved people and my family and stuff like that. So that was one example. And then the second example was through projection, which we're going to cover later in the video. And that was me noticing a personal flaw of mine in another person. And what the flaw was basically the inability to take productive action. And it's always just being able to prepare and to organize and to collect as much input as you possibly can. And with this, it over time, if you just prepare and organize and just get as much input as you can from whatever you're learning, you're never really going to take action in anything. So I started noticing this in a loved one, and I didn't realize it was rooting back to me until I was doing some more deeper shadow work into myself, and I was just becoming conscious and aware of just, all right, I'm trying to figure out like these personal flaws of mine, where else can I improve? And I noticed that the first thing that I noticed about this person was this flaw of theirs, which was just a preparation phase and just kind of stunting to actually get to the action phase of whatever they were doing, right? To actually produce some output. I noticed this was coming back to me because if that's the first thing I projected onto the person from my own psyche and perspective, then that ultimately traces back to me. So for me, the insight was that I had to do something about my own flaw with this because I also have a tendency to get as much input, be prepared. But what I realized is I will never truly be prepared to do anything. And it's always a continuous evolution of your learning, your developmental thinking, your evolution as a human, and so on. So rather than just criticizing that person, I realized that, hey, maybe this person's dealing with it too. But the best thing I can learn from this perspective and insight from seeing it in another person is to come back to myself and to fix it by becoming more productive, creating more output, and actually sharing what I learn. I'm not always going to learn everything to the nth degree to be a complete professional, but you know what? As long as I start producing some output, then at least I can start fixing this defective part of my shadow and integrate it into myself to become more productive, create more output, and actually share what I know versus just hoarding it and just constantly thinking I'm unprepared. All right. So those are some two quick examples from my own life. So now let's get down to the meat of the video. So first things first, let's talk about the shadow itself. So in Jungian philosophy, which it was basically developed by Carl Jung, a Swiss psychologist, he said that within the psyche there are basically three elements. There's the conscious. The conscious is basically we're constantly aware of every single day. It's our waking state. It's our ability to think, right? So that's the one state of the psyche. The second state is the unconscious, is basically where it contains memories, experiences, subconscious habits, thoughts, knowledge, and then things which can be repressed, which is where your shadow resides. It's like a part within the unconscious mind. And the collective unconscious is basically a transpersonal realm. It is something that is beyond the personal. It is something where like a greater part of the psyche where it basically transcends the ordinary human conscious. It's something that has to do with symbols, with meaning, with these collective archetypes that are unconscious within ourselves, like the mother, the hero, the warrior, and such like that. We're not really going to delve much into that because that's not what the video is going to talk about, but that's just like a surface description of it. So, what is the role of the shadow within our psyche? It is basically this part of ourselves that contains all of our repressions, things that we basically shove under the rug, such as what we can be, our idealized self, or things which society may find taboo, but we may have a preference or a liking towards it, which we're not really allowed to express it or basically act out of it. It's this concept. It's not like an entity. It's not like this being or something within yourself. It's just a part of your psyche that you can call it like a storage box, right? Where it's in your subconscious mind. And over time, as you basically throw things you're not allowed to be, or you're like let's say you want to self-actualize in life or just become the most best self, but you know you're not really following towards that path, you're basically throwing all that potential like into this storage box. And in this storage box, over time, it starts accumulating. It starts becoming more blacker and blacker. Like let's say you believe you have a life purpose in life and you are not following with that purpose. Even though you may be denying the existence and your ability to have courage to follow it, it's gonna like all these thoughts and all like these emotions you build around it, it's gonna be getting stored within this shadow where over time it's going to start defecting your own personality, such as leaking out through projection or just subtle envy, jealousy, and stuff like that. It's what your conscious self, in short, is throwing under the rug. It's just hiding it. It's making you be in denial. It's basically not being willing to acknowledge what you want to express, convey, become, or fix, and it's just like closing it in a closet door. That's what it is. So let's go over some practical methods how you can basically explore most of this shadow that is within your psyche. So first one, it is about just self-reflection. The most powerful habit I've built over time is just simply journaling. You can do it through physical format or you can do it through some type of digital format, such as using a tool like Obsidian, or a lot of people use Notion. I prefer Obsidian. Some people use like Evernote, stuff like that. So by developing a consistent habit where whether once a day, 2 times a day, I do 2 times a day, morning and night, you just take some time to journal. What's going on today? How did you perform today? How did you behave? How did you respond in XYZ situation? And what could have you done better? By collecting like an archive of these daily journaling habits, you can start to over time see patterns, and you can start to see different themes, things that you are constantly saying, oh, this could have been improved on. If you're noticing a certain area in your life where you are constantly telling yourself that you want to see improvement, but you keep on following it back into the same pattern, then perhaps that might be somewhere to look more deeper into, because maybe some aspect of your shadow is being repressed there and it's contributing to the problem overall. So there's a journaling component, and then within self-reflection there's also the ability to develop the skill of introspection. And introspection is basically, rather than focusing most of your attention outside of yourself, it's being able to retract it and allow yourself to go more inward, deeper. I feel like this is a personal strength of mine, and whenever I'm able to go on long contemplative walks, or just to be able to, even when I'm like doing the dishes or some menial little task, and I'm able to like think and process my thinking, what's going on in my life, I'm able to basically go in myself and see like, all right, like this is what I'm doing right, this is not what I'm doing right. Or if I'm just present in a moment and I just start seeing thoughts arise, that is just basically telling me when I'm being present that in this moment my default brain process is to think of XYZ. And if it's telling me that without me consciously forcing a thought or like linking a thought to it, it's just arising out of nowhere, then that's maybe telling me something that from my subconscious, something is being projected, and it could be something from your shadow. So if you're just being present and you're developing this introspective skill and you notice a tendency for you to always think of, oh, this financial problem, or why do I get so angry so much because of this person doing this, or why do I always get jealous, or like, screw this guy, he's doing something better than I am, you know what I mean? So it might be telling you that maybe you have an anger tendency, or maybe there's something within yourself that you're angry at, and you're starting to just create this chain of thinking where it just spawns to anger, hatred, and stuff like that. And so simply just by being present and noticing these thoughts come up, you can just develop this introspective skill to understand where to look more into and where to work. So the journaling habit and the introspective skill, it in a way goes hand in hand, because with the introspection, like building a sort of self-awareness, you're able to analyze, dissect, be present, be open to what's in your mind. And then when you're journaling, you're able to keep a log and archive over time to just see how you're transforming, see where you need more improvement in, or what is basically the issue or problem in your life that needs to be handled right now. The second concept or practical method you can start to apply to explore your shadow is through dream work. And I've been a huge advocate and just practitioner of this because I feel like there's a lot of wisdom you can learn in performing dream analysis. So if you already do have the habit of journaling, then you can also include a section within your daily journal where you start to analyze the nature of your dreams, the patterns. What is the theme, the general things, or the nature of things going on within your dreams that are perhaps repeating? Are you always being frightened by something? Are you being attacked? Are you attacking something? Maybe that could be something about you not being able to control your aggression, or maybe there is aggression in your life. Or are you like stressed, waking up stressed in your dreams? Perhaps you may be going through a lot of stress, or something may be keeping you at this state of mind because of the things going on in your actual physical life. So by doing dream analysis, you're basically tapping into one of the most deepest part of your psyche, which is the subconscious. And if I haven't mentioned what the psyche is overall earlier, it's just basically the entire framework, your entire human structure of experiencing life. It contains the conscious, subconscious, collective unconscious, and perhaps even more, but let's not get into that. So when you're dreaming and then you're able to develop the habit of, like, whether you wake up in the middle of the night or if you wake up first thing in the morning, just start journaling down and try practicing recalling what you saw in the dream. Because over time, if you start noticing these themes, or like if you see, maybe you see certain people in your dreams, it doesn't mean that is your shadow, but what these people represent, the symbols behind it. If you see symbols, if you see some type of figures or some type of event or experience, what is the meaning behind it? Because as humans, we like to focus on and create meaning behind different things, like fitting pieces into a puzzle to see what it means. That's what we're like wired to do. So you can apply this same strength that we all as humans have into your dreams and see, what are they pointing to? Maybe there's something within this dream I can log down right now and then be able to integrate it in the future. So that is with dreaming. The next practical thing or just the method we're going to explore is of mindfulness. So there's two techniques. The first technique we're going to discuss is inward mindfulness, and the second technique we're going to do conscious mindfulness. So what is inward mindfulness? Inward mindfulness is when you're developing some sort of habit of doing a type of meditation per se, right? I would define it as doing a meditation. So when you're doing inward meditation, you're basically retracting your consciousness and you're going back into yourself. You're developing this introspective skill, you could say, but more with some actual actionable steps you can take. So for instance, let's say you want to start practicing this. What would you do? You would just start a meditation habit, but what do? So let's say you sit down cross-legged, or maybe in a chair, or some people like to lay down. Once you do that, then you want to close your mind or your eyes. Once you close your eyes, you just want to first center yourself, because the first thing that usually happens when we enter meditation, especially for people who are not experienced with meditation, is that your mind is just rambling. There's so much noise. Maybe you don't even know how to concentrate your mind and just enter a state of complete stillness yet, right? It comes with practice. It gets easier over time, but in the beginning, I understand, because maybe you had a rough day, or in the morning, some people's mind and not be able to fully concentrate yet. You know what I mean? Everyone's different. So the first objective in inward mindfulness, this technique, is to just sit down and focus by centering yourself. How do you center yourself? There's a few ways. So first, one way is just to close your eyes for 5-10 minutes, set a timer, and or you can just kind of like sense it, I guess. 5-10 minutes. What you can do is just focus on scanning your body. Scan it slowly from the top down. You can even scan it in different parts of your limbs, different bodies. And anytime like some thought arise, just shift your attention from the thought to your body itself. Once you shift your attention from the body itself, excuse me, that was just a text. Gonna mute that. Anyway, once you shift your attention from the thought to your body itself, just keep on focusing on scanning your body, focusing on centering yourself. That is one way. Another way is just to focus on your breathing as you inhale and as you exhale. As you inhale and as you exhale. That is another way. You can just start by focusing on yourself. After you initiate this meditation for 5-10 minutes, I think that's like a solid enough time. By constantly recentering yourself with just this focusing technique, you can eventually enter a more sort of concentrated or awareness state where you're just aware. You're not really thinking about anything, you're just present and you're aware. So what happens in this state is that after you've focused and centered yourself, you can now stop performing the scanning exercise or focusing on a limb or a body part, or just like some people like to also center themselves by focusing in the center of their forehead or like the heart center. What you can do is just become extremely presently aware. So rather than following a thought to see where it goes, you just notice a thought arise and then you just let it go. Because the way these thoughts work is that when they arise, we tend to link it with another thought, and then another thought, and then another thought. It's just by constant association, and then we just go down this rabbit hole. So what you want to do is just, when you notice a thought come, acknowledge it, let it go away. You see another one, acknowledge it, let it go away. That's just becoming purely aware. And the powerful technique, or just the powerful insight that comes from this, is just when you notice these thoughts arising, you can start to see what your subconscious is just projecting to the conscious. So part of it could also be from the shadow, like what's the thing that is just constantly arising spontaneously? Is it because of some type of aggressiveness within yourself? Is it something that like a flaw you notice in another person or something like that? So just by being in this state of awareness, you can start to see what your unconscious mind is just projecting upward towards the conscious. So that is one technique of just with inward meditation you can utilize to gain some more insight. And the other technique would be conscious mindfulness. What is conscious mindfulness? Conscious mindfulness is just learning to be presently aware in your daily activities. So rather than just always being trapped in the cycle of just constant thought and just constant mentation of just different scenarios and like for me, that's something I do by default because I feel like it's a strength of mine to be able to work out so many different perspectives and unique insights from all these things that I am connecting, synthesizing, and working out. But there's times too within my day where I just try to be completely present and just allow the experience just to be, just to experience it itself, just to allow some stillness into my life. And when you're applying this sort of conscious mindfulness, all you're doing is the same technique applied from the inward meditation technique applied with just awareness into your day-to-day activities. You're allowing thoughts to come up as you're being present. You're not trying to associate too much or link more thoughts with them to like just spiral down a chain of thoughts, but you're acknowledging them that they're coming here, and then you're just letting go. And if anything, and you're in this present state of awareness, what you can do is if something insightful comes, you can just write it down in your journal, write it down somewhere. What I like to do is within my digital journal, I like to have a section for shadow work. And then I basically put down all the things which may be correlated or may have something to do with my shadow work, where I can in the future come back and, get some insight, see if I can perform some work, and just archive it somewhere. Just keep it somewhere so you can come back to and build into that database of knowledge. So that is with conscious meditation. And the fourth practical method we can utilize is just simple feedback from people. So you have to just find someone who knows you, who they have like a baseline understanding of your personality, not maybe like someone new into your life who may not really understand the full nature of your personality, but somebody who you can confidently go up to and you can tell that they have a baseline understanding. And what I mean by baseline understanding is like, say for instance, you have a mom, right? Let's say you have a mom. You understand what she's normally like. You understand what she's like when she's pissed off. You understand what she's like when she's not having a good day. You understand what she looks and feels like when she's having a good day. But all of these like extreme polarities of where her mood or emotions can shift, they all center back to like this baseline of like, all right, this is how this person usually acts just in general, right? And then you notice that when they go extremes points beyond that, that they're like elated or they're extremely sad or they're having a terrible day, you understand that they go back to this baseline. So if you can find like close friends, best friends, maybe some mentors, teachers, whoever you associate a lot of time with, they probably have this baseline level of you. When they have this baseline level of you, you just want to tell them, hey, this is my baseline. You know me probably the best. Can you give me some more insight as to what am I doing which may not be my ordinary self? Or what am I doing that may not seem congruent to what I aspire to be or what I want to be? Or maybe there's some type of flaw in my integrity, how I'm behaving as to what I want to behave as or what I say I'm behaving as. Tell them to like just be real with you. Ask them to give you some insights where they may not be willing to express because they feel like it may hurt you or something like that. So you can develop this perspective from something outside of yourself. So you're not basically going into your own perspective and point of view to analyze, but you're actually getting the point of view and perspective of somebody else. And keep in mind, they can also project their own shadow onto you, whatever their flaws and defects are, just by simply, especially too, if the person you're talking to is doing also shadow work and they notice a flaw in you where they see it in themselves, you can gain a lot of insight just from that itself. Because if they see a flaw in you and they see it in themselves, that means that there's a mutual benefit you both can work on, the flaw in yourself and the flaw that the other person is trying to fix. So there's a lot of insight that can come from just getting simple feedback from a person. Now, and then the final, which we're just going to keep short for the practical method, is speaking or getting help from some professional. Now, I'm not going to really go much into depth because it's just pretty self-explanatory, but if you feel like you need professional help, if you feel like there's just some part of yourself you cannot fix no matter what you do, then just get professional help. Go seek some type of therapist or psychologist or some type of holistic person, or I don't know. Find some type of counselor and get that professional help. That's always the fifth option, or it could be your first option, whatever. But just fifth in the context of how I'm laying out this overall concept. In enlightenment work, there's this concept of attachment and negation. If you're doing any of the two, it is hindering your process. So, in the unfoldment of consciousness and just the natural progression of its growth is integration and ascension. It's growing from one level to another and basically integrating the lower part into the higher self. So, for instance, let's take a simple plant. A plant has some type of life form, right? It has the ability to grow, to repopulate, and so on. And then it comes to like the next level of the kingdom, animal kingdom nature. So now there's this type of living, breathing organism which can basically repopulate, hunt, become more intelligent in some way. So that is the next level of developmental evolution. And then following that, we have human species where they're able to rationalize and use the cognitive mind faculties to create, to unite different cultures, create different types of technologies, and educate each other on new concepts and ideas, influence the masses. So, what I mean by integration and ascension, the same idea applies to shadow work because it's only a developmental part of your overall growth as a human and what I would also say a spiritual being. In integral theory, there's the idea that reality itself is not one time dimensional. There's multiple dimensions that make up reality and existence itself. So, for instance, as we can see here in the chart, there's the individual subjective, which has to do with the I, the individual objective, which has to do with the it, things outside of ourselves, what we interact with, the collective objective, which is basically like structures, systems, the collective subjective, which is like we, the beliefs we share on a collective level, the values, cultures, communities, and so on. What we're mainly concerned with is just the individual subjective, the I. And within the individual subjective, there's also multi-dimensions that comprise it. So for instance, at the lower tier, we have the shadow, the ego, existential, and then the mind. So in short, what the shadow is basically what we're covering now. It's that part of your unconscious mind where things tend to get repressed, especially like your idealized heroic self. Then there's the ego. The ego is just the concept you think of yourself. Who do you think you are? What do you identify with? And then there's the existential layer, which is something like that has to do with the self-actualization process, what you can be, having higher meta motives, such as becoming more transpersonal and looking out for like the welfare of others, the earth. And then there's of course the mind, which is transpersonal. All of these layers that make up this subjective dimension, they all transcend and include each other. So from the shadow, we get to the ego, and then the ego contains the shadow. So then the existential part, it contains the ego and the shadow, but it transcends it. And then it moves on towards like more spiritual parts of our own psyche, which then has to do with the mind, but we're not really going to get into that right now. So if there's a division between any of these stages that you're in within your own developmental evolution, there's going to be a duality. And when there is a duality, it hinders your progress to transcend and include to the next part of the evolutionary phase of your life. So if there is a major part or some flaw within your shadow that is holding you back from where you can be, there's going to be a duality. And until that duality is fixed and settled, only then can you grow as a whole person, because the whole entire part or the main idea behind what I'm trying to present here to the viewer is that we're trying to incorporate an integral frame of mind into our shadow work. It's not just shadow work, it's integral shadow work, because you are as a whole becoming more integral. You are transcending, including parts of yourself to become a more idealized and self-actualized individual. You're not ignoring parts of yourself, you're not repressing it, but you're learning how to gain some wisdom, some clarity from that shadow part of yourself to integrate it into one, and then to be able to grow from it. So when we don't do this and we negate it, pathologies can develop. One big one is a split life pathology. So for me, as an example, this was a split life pathology, and I am most likely going to be making a video in the future on pathologies and just spiritual work and growing overall as an individual. But a split life pathology is when there is a dualism between one of these stages. So for me, it was the ego and existential. I know that, there's this part of myself where I want material success, but then there's this existential part of myself and this transpersonal part of myself that wants to be more whole and integrated. So what do? I have to figure out how to create a lifestyle to basically integrate all these components where it gives me a meaningful life. It's not just repressing one part of it and making me pursue just pure material success, but it's allowing me to pursue some type of material success while also too growing spiritually, and also too being able to find some meaning within my work. So that is one type of pathology. It's the split life. When you're trying to pursue two things, there's confusion. You don't know where you go. You go one way, you go the other way, and then you're not really going anywhere. That's a split life. The second one is a repression of your heroic self. You can be something, and this is just a classic shadow work example. You can be something, but you're not doing it. You're repressing it. You're hiding it. So what happens is this pathology develops while you're doing something to rationally tell yourself that this is the way to go, while covertly admitting to yourself within yourself that you could be this, but you're not doing that. So over time, as the separation widens, this sort of hole within you starts to build, and the bigger it is, the greater this pathology is going to start afflicting or just influencing your relationships, your happiness, your zest for life. So some examples to demonstrate that. And the next thing I want to talk about is just how to integrate it. So what we have to understand about the nature of the universe is that everything doesn't just merely disappear. What happens is there's a transference or just transmutation of energy from one source to the next. Nothing just simply disappears. Things just move. Like energy, like money is energy, and just emotions could be energy too. It just shifts from one pole to something else, or everything just transforms into something else. So with shadow work, if we understand that there's these flaws, these themes, these patterns that we need to work on, all we have to do is just learn how to transfer that energy into something productive. So if like for me earlier, early on in the video, I talked about just me being stingy and seeing like some type of unproductive flaw in another person. What I had to do to transmute that energy that I was projecting outwards was just to transmute it into something productive and healthy. How? So instead of being stingy, start being more contributing to your community, your family, some random person, buy them a random coffee, something like that. That's one way. The other way you can perhaps transmute this negative flaw within yourself is or like with the other example, is instead of being unproductive and always just organizing your notes and stuff like that and never really taking any action, start taking action. All right? Because when you start transferring that energy that is holding you back per se into something productive, you're integrating that part, and you're basically ascending into some higher part of yourself where you can integrate that flaw and become something renewed out of it. You can become more whole. You can become a person who is not being repressed or repressing their lower self or something like that. Rather, you can become someone who is maximizing on this negative energy into something productive, something positive, something that rather it holding you back, it can make you more whole and better as an overall person. So the main key concept of just this section of integrating the shadow is to be able to transcend and integrate these lower parts of yourself. As we saw in the chart earlier, these parts may be holding us from developing into higher actualized people. So rather than it holding us back, you want to learn how to transcend and include it. Learn how to get some wisdom, some clarity from it first by, utilizing some of the practical methods we discussed. And then you want to see how you can integrate it, how you can transmute that energy into something positive, how you can learn and grow from it, what kind of insights you can generate to become more integral in your approach towards life. So with that said, that was basically the video. What we went over today was just the concept of the shadow, exactly what it is, the 5 practical methods that you can use to explore your shadow, and then some key ways how to become more integral, how to integrate it into your life to just unleash that force, that power within you that is capable of doing a lot of good, a lot of positive things which can come out of it. So by doing this, I believe we can become more whole and more integral, and we can take a more holistic approach towards life to have a life full of meaning, zest, and happiness. Other than this, I'm Jan. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time watching this, I'd really appreciate some feedback on this video. Any like, any subscription, Definitely helps me know that you guys are liking my work, what kind of insights I'm providing here. I have a lot of cool concepts coming out in the future. So if you found this insightful, if maybe you gained some new little key nugget out of it or something like that, I really appreciate you just sharing this. But other than that, I'm Jan. I'm logging off, and we'll see you in the next one.